Feel like the biggest marital problem between the two of you is y'all touching each other, right? I have a hard and fast rule. I don't touch any lovers or spouses or anybody I'm even tangentially related to.
Hi, everybody. Welcome again to the Off Meta Weekly podcast. I'm Hayley. To my right is Adam. Below Adam, we have Tyler. And our esteemed guest this week, just underneath me, is Ed. Hi, Ed. Welcome, Ed. Everybody knows Ed. Aggie had some fighting words last week about poisoners not being ranked as A. So thanks for that, Ed.
I'll fight Aggie on this. It's fine.
I believed it was because you have a solver's bias, Ed, but we won't get into that today. That's not the topic of this here particular edition of the Off Meta podcast.
I mean, it might end up being depends what Ed says next, but
well, you have a script that we didn't read, so that's possible.
Sorry about this. Adam changed all my PC settings. I thought it was good to go. I wasn't.
Feel like the biggest marital problem between the two of you is y'all touching each other's computers.
Yes.
Right? I have a hard and fast rule. I don't touch any lovers or spouses or anybody I'm even tangentially related to. Don't touch their computer. Only a coworker, because they're not supposed to be up to no good anyway, right? You know what I'm saying? I don't work in an office anymore, so.
I really thought that sentence was just ending after the problem here is that you two touch each other.
Yeah.
That's just...
yeah, Tyler starting that with, I don't touch my lovers. I was like, oh.
That's yeah, I can't run for office because they'll just take that first part of the sentence and that'll be it. And that'll be played on CNN over and over again. I don't touch lovers.
All right, so first of all, we're just going to have a quick catch-up for those of you that don't know Ed. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone knows Ed, but for those that don't know you, and in true game show fashion, who are you, Ed, and where are you from?
I am Ed, surprisingly. I'm from the UK. I play in Sheffield and most conventions up and down the UK at this point. And apparently, there are people who know who I am but don't immediately know who I am. Some of you will have seen where this weekend I was at a games convention and someone invited me to play this new game, Blood in the Clocktower, which was quite funny. And then about an hour later, I got another message going, I've just been told who you are. I was like, yeah, okay, that'll do it. Poor guy, had no idea.
I long for the day that gets to happen to me. We tried to have a ringer once where we brought Ben Downs in to play with the New York group online. The New York group never played online again after that, but they figured out who Ben Downs was, so we're all good. Before we move on, though, Ed, an interesting fact about you so that people can use to steal your identity, please.
I mean, the most interesting fact about me is there's nothing interesting about me. I have somehow managed to entirely maintain the persona of an android, which is why I find the rules so easy.
I've seen you as a folk dancer, Ed. That is pretty interesting.
He doesn't want to talk about that, Tyler. We can't make him talk about that, Tyler. Ed,
he just said it didn't exist. I'm calling him out on a lie. In any case, we're talking about the rules.
Today we're going to be ranking nothing. Just for a little change of pace. Today we're going to be talking about the rules, how you figure them out, what you do about them, and what's important in Clocktower, especially when you're storytelling either new characters, new roles, new scripts for the first time. So, Ed, some people may know you as the person on the unofficial that acts like they know a lot about the rules and tells everyone how to run things. Do you want to just talk us through your background as to how that came to be?
Yeah, I mean, I love the phrasing of who thinks they know the answers. I love it because that's basically it. That's functionally what happened. I think I've mentioned before that I just saw the Kickstarter and rolled up to a game that Ben was running in the UK. Ben Burns was running. But as will also not surprise people, I had read the rulebook and all of the almanacs at least twice before I did turn up to that first game. And that's generally a lot of where this comes from. I like rules. I learn them relatively easily from text, which helps a lot. But also, I find it quite easy to dig through implications and interactions. And it only took, I don't know, a few games before I was looking at it and looking at a lot of the characters and going, you know, how do these fit together? What's broken? What can I change? And then that did result in me just sending things to Ben, being like, it feels like this is a problem. And Ben then passing them on to Stephen. And eventually it sort of carried on, got asked to help with playtesting and various other things. Early on in the unofficial, John Jenkset, the Rules Inquisitor, was the Rules Inquisitor. He was the rules guy. But he got massively busy with a PhD and, you know, having a life. So in his absence, I just sort of de facto became the source of knowledge. because John wasn't around. And then John has now looked at the idea of taking that back and gone, no thanks. You can answer all the questions. You can be the guy that people go to. So yeah, that's pretty much where we've ended up.
So let's begin with this, Ed. If we want to get people out there and they're going to go storytell, let's take the online game first, right? Because that's what we do a lot of. What resources do people have available if they've got rules question? How would you guide somebody who's saying you want to storytell your first game, you're going to do it using the brain tool? What resources, if they have a rules question, would you point them towards?
First thing is obviously read the rulebook and then read the almanac. Presumably, if it's your first game, it's most likely to be Trouble Brewing. The almanac is there. It's a great resource, and certainly in the context of the base 3 editions, the almanacs are gospel. There's almost no situations where there's going to be questions that are in the base 3 that aren't answered by your almanac. If you are having confusion beyond that, then there's a lot of resources that the unofficial, you can ask people. There's plenty of people there, not just me, that will answer any rules questions for you. So if you're pre-game and you've realized you already have questions, then there are plenty of places to go look. You can also go on the wiki, although it doesn't tend to be quite as rules specific. The wiki is more advice, but it should at least give you, if you're confused about what a character is supposed to do, it gives you a lot of sort of guidance as to what that character might be trying to do, and therefore sort of helps understand the gist of the intention of a character if you're having confusion on that front. But then that all changes as soon as you're in a game, because as soon as you're in a game, the answer is you are God. There's a reason that the atheist is called the atheist. It's because the storyteller is God, and you just have to make the calls as best you can. I say this to people frequently, that if you're coming to look up an answer during a game, you're actually more likely to get it wrong, unless it's something that you're just like, I'm 98% sure it's this. I'm literally just opening the almanac to see the reference that I know is there. If you're trying to look up a question that you're like, I genuinely don't know the answer, most of the time, if you try and look it up really quickly or ask the question really quickly, you're more likely to get it wrong than if you just look at it yourself, look at the 2 character abilities, and make a call. And at the end of the day, there's no such thing as being wrong when you've made a call during a game, as long as your players know that's the call you're making. That if X and Y happens, then this is what I'm ruling for this game. And you can say at the end of the game, I might have got that wrong. I'm going to check, but for now, that's what I ruled. No one's going to object to that. That's part of a game with a GM as opposed to a perfect machine running your game for you.
It's very sweet of you to say that no one will object. Objectively untrue. But hey, I'm glad that that's the mindset that we're going to try to put people in. Be nice to these folks who are running their first game. If they get something wrong in the rules, it's okay. You didn't have money on it, I hope. Don't put money on your Clocktower games. That's a rule I live by.
I think you're fundamentally misunderstanding the aim of Clocktower being to win if you're putting money on it. It's a game. We're here to have fun.
So it's a really interesting point. I would say don't just be nice to the new storytellers. You could be nice to those of us that might have run a few hundred, couple thousand, whatever it is now games. I've got no idea anymore. Ed, when you get like these weird things being raised to you that you maybe haven't thought of before, those 3 cases over the last 12 years of those things you hadn't already thought of, what do you do to work through those issues? How do you come up with the right resolution?
There's kind of 3 situations for rules questions, and pretty much everything falls into one of them. The first one is the easiest one. It's interactions where it's quite clear. I should wind back briefly because I'm about to use terminology. I quite often refer to rules as written, rules as intended, and rules as fun. Rules as written is literally what the text says. Rules as intended is what the character is supposed to do, what that rule is supposed to mean. And rules as fun is what it sounds like. It's the way that you make it most interesting and most entertaining. So yeah, the first interaction type that I have quite a lot is the easiest. It's when rules as written, rules intended, and rules as fun produce the same answer. It's quite clear that, in the vast majority of situations, character X and character Y, you can do one thing that solves both abilities exactly as the text says. That's what the character was supposed to do in the first place. That's how those were supposed to interact. It's relatively clear that this combination of things happens. That one's simple. I barely answer any of those questions anymore because there are people who are far quicker on Discord than I am, and so I only tend to get the ones where there's confusion. So it's the other 2 which get interesting, and it's basically, number 2 is interactions where technically rules as written Like if you did a very strict, if you assumed that the only rules in the game was character ability 1 and character ability 2, they would resolve, it'd work, but it's not interesting or fun. So for example, things like the marionette and the poppy grower. If the poppy grower dies, technically under the strict rules as written ability text of the poppy grower, all minions should learn who the demon is and vice versa. That's not the point of the marionette, but technically that's what the ability says. It's not contradicted by the marionette, so you should, in theory, tell the marionette who the other minions are, who the demon is. It's a really simple example. It's a really easy example of one that, yeah, that's not the intention. That's not fun. It's not fun to tell your marionette in that situation. That's one of the several jinxes the marionette has where that doesn't happen, basically. And that's quite an easy one. It's quite easy to come up with those sort of things because you literally just go, what's the intention of marionette? What's the intention of poppy grower? How do we fit these together? And that's quite an easy one. The marionette doesn't learn the other minions or the demon when the poppy grower dies. And then situation 3 is the trickiest one where rules as written just clashes. There's sort of directly contradictory statements in the ability text. I think probably the most well-known one is in the base 3. It's in BMR. You've got the assassin and the goon. Assassin says no matter what. Goon says they're drunk. And those just don't fit together because you can look at the goon ability and say, well, both the rules as written of the goon and the intention of the goon is that they drunk any character that picks them. But the rules as written and intended of the assassin is that they kill any character they pick. They just don't go together. And again, it comes down to, at that point, a judgment usually on Steve's part, but sometimes with suggestions where he goes, which of these do I want to supersede? What's going to make it most interesting? What gets the most entertaining emergent gameplay? Those are rarest. There's very few where like the rules as written directly contradicts, but when they are, the vast majority of the time, I have to go, I'd house rule this for these reasons, because this is interesting, this is fun, these characters get to do the best they can, and then I turn around to Steve and go, there's a problem. Poke him to change things in his game.
So let me take this a step further. If somebody is running a game live, what precepts as a storyteller would you give them and say, if you want to make an error on this end, or think about this anytime you're making a decision about X, Y, and Z? Anything like that you would give guidance on?
I think my golden rule does count down to, am I justifying the player choices and am I maintaining fun for everyone concerned? Anytime I'm trying to make a rules call, and this also applies when you're making a lot of storyteller calls, it's not just rules ones, it's things like who you kill with Little Monster and Legion, all that sort of thing. The same logic applies. Look at the people involved, look at it from their perspective. Are they going to A, understand, and B, like the call you've made after the game? If you fail on everyone liking it, everyone understanding it is a perfectly acceptable backup. But in the ideal world, you want all of them to both like and understand the call. And that comes down to, if someone's making a play and you, within the rules, can back that play, try and do it wherever possible, because they're making a play. That's what they want from you the vast majority of the time. If you legally can't back it within the rules, ideally find a way where you're at least not directly contradicting the play they're making. A lot of the time, that might include, it's something that Adam does all the time. I think Adam's one of the proponents that taught me this lesson of going, I will neither confirm nor deny whether I made that mistake. That would be a mistake. That is wrong, but I might have made it. Usually, it's someone who's made an error, and it's relying on you having made an error, and actually, rather than you blowing them out the water with saying, no, that's incorrect and I wouldn't have done that, it's worth taking at least leaving that vague for them. Bear in mind, I learnt that from Adam. Did you have anything further on that one, Adam?
It's one of those things you do to help new players trying to bluff a roll. I'm never going to tell you that that's not what I did. I might have woken them up accidentally and said 1. I mean, shit, I've done that accidentally. So it's not a lie to say I could have done it.
I think it can depend on the context in which they ask you as well, right? So if they're asking you about current game happenings, or if they're saying to you, what would usually happen if this, according to the rules for this particular role. So if they've like taken you aside for a sidebar and said, I need to understand this character and how it works, I think that is then, okay, this is the rules answer. But if they're asking you, well, what's happened in this game? Such and such has told me this happened. And it's like, well, that's part of the game. So as a storyteller, I can't tell you one way or the other if what they're saying is true.
That's a good precept, right? But people have very different reactions to that. And we see that play out differently, I think, online versus in person. That sense of, You're telling me that you would have done this terrible, dumb thing as a storyteller, and you go, it's possible. Well, that's bullshit. I can't solve anything then. I've seen that reaction from people. You can't possibly say that. And I was like, well, I mean, you know, I could have said that. I don't know. I can't confirm that or deny that, right? I think there are different levels of questions that you get in the online game versus the in-person game. We were talking about that the other night. The online player is maybe got a little bit more time to stew in their juices, and they are just playing so many games that they've seen a lot of different interactions and they want to ask about this very weird set of circumstances. How do you approach those hypothetical questions in a game?
I personally don't mind indulging those, especially within the spectrum of characters that are available. Because of the nature of my personal position, where I have had to, for all of the Kickstarter characters, I've written up these pseudo-almanacs that are what people are using as the rules. So if people are coming up with questions, the vast majority of the time, I would hope that it's something that I've at least looked at, and usually because Jack's gone, what happens in this situation? And I've already answered the question. So I don't mind that so much. A trick that I would recommend to everyone when you are getting a rules question on a general basis is repeat and reframe the question, because that gives you a chance to think about it just in the process of saying the words. The classics is sort of someone coming up and going, oh, if a Fangu has attacked someone who's protected, do they lose their job? And rather than just trying to go think about it and go yes or no, repeat it back. It's always worthwhile to repeat it back. One, because a lot of the time they've phrased their question badly and that's not what they're asking. And two, it gives you a moment to go, so the situation is we have a Fangu that hasn't used their jump yet, and they attack an outsider, and that outsider is protected by the monk. And you can actually plow through it. You can plow through the logic of the abilities word by word as you're saying them out loud. And it also gives them the opportunity to correct anything. So it gives you a lot of opportunity to work out the answers you run. I will generally do that. Partially, I have a lot of experience. I know the rules very well, and I'm happy to go down that road. The other thing that there's never any issue with you doing is going, I'm pretty sure I'd rule this, and that's what I'm ruling for this game, and just hitting an answer and sticking with it. But then there's also nothing wrong with hitting an answer and saying, this is what I'm ruling, this is what you get to deal with.
One of the things is that I think you should do exactly what you're describing, even if that situation exactly happened already and you already know how you would have ruled it. You should be performative in that way if you're the storyteller, because it makes it more difficult for them to decide whether or not occurred or did not occur. Oh, so to make it just right, you're asking if this happened and if these things were in play, what would I do? Because if you answer too quick, he must have already considered that. So for the purposes of stream, it is a show version of the game. I wouldn't want to put players through having to sit around and wait for me to look up answers. It just interrupts the flow of play. So you talked about the base 3 scripts and how those things kind of already been worked out. You can already see all those different angles. When people start wanting to engage in custom scripts, what steps should they take to kind of prepare for those different interactions?
There are a few, amongst other things. Custom scripts opens up the world of all the Kickstarter characters, which tend to have. If I was going to describe the Kickstarter characters as one broad category, they're all things that break fundamental game rules in one way or another. That's what they're kind of intended for. The bigger, more splashy characters. When I'm looking at a custom script, the first thing is have a quick skim of those splashier characters and have a quick check. Are there any weird things that happen as a result of that? It's not just the Kickstarter characters that have this, but certainly S&V is the other script that provides characters that do this. Have a look at all your townsfolk. If you've got Vortox on the script, skim through. Are there anywhere false information is weird? If you've got a pit hag, are there any of these townsfolk that when evil do strange things? It's just worth looking at those things that do sort of norm breaking things, and then have a quick check if there's major ones that might come up. No one's expecting you to work out some combination where there's multiple evil townsfolk and they're all trying to select each other with their abilities. You're going to have to roll with that on the run. That happens. But yeah, having a look at those Vortoxes, having a look at pit hag changes, having a look at philosophers and a few other bits and pieces, just to double check the ones that do things that don't normally happen. And certainly when you're putting a traveller in. Yeah, if it's not a TB traveller, think at least 3 times during that first night when they're coming to play. Have a bit of a skim over not just the characters that are in play, but have a skim over all the characters on that sheet. does this traveler do anything weird to these characters?
This isn't exactly related, but just talk about SMV and the Vortox for a second, because I think this tip might help other people. So I think for about 3 SMV games in a row running it in person, with the Vortox in play, I forgot to give the Flower Girl the reverse info. Don't know why. Didn't do it with the Town Crier, but did it with the Flower Girl and had to go away and fix that afterwards. So I started doing this tip when there's a character I'm unsure of, or I feel like I need to spend a little bit longer. And you can do this in person specifically, unfortunately, not so much with the online play. In person, I put there are notification tokens or reminder tokens that you can put next to the script of which characters are in play and which ones you need to do something with. I put 2 next to it. But that's my tip for the Flower Girl. If you have an experience with a character or one that's making you nervous that you might mess up on, just go ahead and put 2 reminder tokens next to it to just remind yourself to take an extra time to look at that character to make sure you don't make a mistake.
I love the fact that you do that, because I use the amnesiac tokens. I will generally keep the amnesiac tokens because they're just question marks, the reminder tokens. I'll keep them in my grimoire at all times if I'm running a custom script. And if there's characters where I often screw up, I will whack an amnesiac token next to them to remind myself that they're weird and I need to not do the obvious thing. And yeah, the Vortox is the main one of those. And people will discover this as they go back to play more in person. I've screwed up the Vortox more times in person, having run 1/10 of as many games than I have online. Because in person, you've got a lot more going on. You just have so much more to pay attention to. You're trying to move around a town square. You're avoiding the town square board in the center. You're trying to check who's waking up. You're trying to keep an eye on what's going on. You're trying not to trip over people. Everything at once, and it's so easy to just wake up that Flower Girl, nod, put them back to sleep, and then and have to go back.
Well, so that's a question that I have for you then is, when does a storyteller mistake, when does it become kind of unsalvageable?
I think I've only done that, as far as I can recall.
We weren't asking for you to brag, Ed.
Mainly because I was quite lucky when I started, because I started storytelling with a group of people, firstly, who were only interested in playing TV for a while. I started storytelling with a group of people who were experienced gamers. And frankly, if I made an error, I could turn around to them and go, I'd give them the correct information the next day, during the day, pull them aside and go, you deny that you ever got that one. It was a 0 or whatever, and they will just do it. They'll just treat that as part of the spirit of the game, and they might have that ability, that information, if they really want to meta it, but most of them wouldn't. So that covers a multitude of sins. If you've got players who play in the right spirit, and therefore you can turn around to them and go, this never happened, don't ask questions, they'll do it. That covers a lot of your unsalvageable problems. As a rule, I would say that the time when a game becomes unsalvageable isn't to do with information. You can always correct information, and yeah, people can meta that you've changed their information, but it's changeable. The time when games become unsalvageable is when you've changed characters or alignments and then realize that you screwed up. And that's the one where a lot of the time you've just got to go, nah, okay, I've messed this up, and can it? Because a lot of the time, the fact that you've screwed up a character or an alignment change reveals 60, 70, 80% of the game state to whoever it happens to, and it's unsavable, and that happens. You'll make that mistake. I've done it
Only twice.
I think I've described this before, but the first time I did it was 19-player S&V, where I had a pit hag who turned someone into the evil twin. That same night, that person was the snake charmer who had snake charmed the demon, become a Vortox, then been changed out of the Vortox into the evil twin. And I was so focused on, there's a Vortox in play now, must remember there's a Vortox in play now, that I gave them incorrect information because it was false, because this was before the Vortox specified townsfolk abilities. For anyone who wasn't around at that point, Vortox used to just say, all information is false. And it wasn't townsfolk. So I gave the good evil twin Vortox twin information when they were themselves the ex-Vortox turned evil. Anyway, it got. I think it just all went wrong that game, because that player was also picked by the Serenovas. So I'd woken this player up. They'd picked someone. I've gone, you're now the evil Vortox. I've woken them up again and gone, you're now the evil twin. Here is your good. Your evil good twin, because I got it the wrong way around. And then I woke them up again and went, here's the Serenovas token and the character you're mad. It was just it was an absolute nightmare.
New storyteller, don't be intimidated. It's not like that on your first game, don't worry.
Yeah, don't run 19-player S&V starting at midnight at a convention. That's pretty much the rule.
I can't believe it's Ed. You've never made the mastermind mistake?
Not that I'm aware of. No, I don't think so.
Fuck you, Ed. That's another one I fucked up on. Like, we went back in person pre-Omicron, post-COVID,
Mhm.
in between stage, and BMR again for the first time in person. Evil team killed their demon. I was like, well, the game's over. Demon's dead. And they just looked at me. I was like, fuck, there's a mastermind in play. Sorry, guys.
Having said that, that is the other time I did screw up a game was just the same, but Evil Twin rather than Mastermind. Yeah, Evil Twin should have preserved the game and didn't. Although I also made Ben freak out with that exact thing a while ago. Played a game with the Neuro's Wild people, and there was a starting Evil Twin. We executed the demon on day 2, and Ben was like, "The game's over." And I went, "Hang on, haven't we got twins?" And he had a proper like, "Oh no, I've screwed it up. Oh, I'm so sorry." And then about 2 minutes later, went, "No, wait, the pit hag changed the Evil Twin into the witch last night. I was right." It's the fact that even Ben, just at the idea of me going, "Wasn't there evil twins?" just assumed he was wrong, because that's such a common mistake. Like, twins, mastermind, preservation of games are so like unnatural in the mind, and because they're one token to notice out of your whole circle of players, it's so easy to do.
I think this game is in the archive at Paisley Park. It was recorded for Prince's private collection. We'll never see the light of day. Chicken nugs. So one of the things that we can take away from that, if you're a storyteller, there's not a token for the evil twin saying the game ain't over, right?
Mm.
As long, but you have to kind of put that little token in your own brain. Same thing with the mastermind. Player count with a Scarlet Woman.
Shit, there should be a token, Tyler. Oh, that's a brilliant idea.
Thank you so much. I think the game's already been produced and shipped, but maybe they could add that token. In any case, but you should make that mental note for yourself, and then if those conditions change, right? If your pit hag thinks the evil twin is kind of useless and decides they want to make it into something else, then you should be able to move that token out of your own brain. When you're getting new to storytelling, your internal clock can be off. If anybody here that's watching this has watched American football, they always talk about quarterbacks having a clock in their head about how long they can stay in the pocket before they got to get rid of the ball, that kind of stuff. Anyway, sports analogy wasted on this crowd. You should have that kind of clock as a storyteller.
Don't let your own mind bully you either. It's one of the pieces of advice that I gave to relatively new storyteller recently. They were just like dashing through nights because they were worried that it was taking too long, and because I think they had a spy in play, and so they were like, "Oh, I've got to do this quickly so that the spy can have some time to look at the grimoire." I was just like, it doesn't matter too much, frankly, because most of the time the players are having a conversation during the night anyway. They don't mind. But also, it turned out that a lot of the thing for them was that being able to see the people waiting was putting pressure in their own head. And I was like, if you're thinking about a decision, just turn around, face in the other direction, face out of the circle so you can't see them, and they're not there. It takes away so much pressure. I have had this on occasion. I was storytelling at this convention at the weekend, and someone walked into the room during the night when I was having the classic dilemma in BMR of who am I killing with this damn gossip kill, because every choice felt like I was either swinging the game massively for good or swinging it massively for evil. And he walked in and was just stood there and staring at me, and I was like, yeah, you know what, I'm fully turning my back on you because you're just watching me stare at the grimoire, and that's not helping me think. And so sometimes you have to do that. You have to make the scenario where you can take time. Also, if you have the resource there, take advantage of it. If there's another game going on and you can wander over to the other storyteller and be like, just check it. What's going on here? A lot of the time, you don't need words for that. Like, I've definitely had that before where story told games with Jack at the same time, and Jack's wandered over holding a reminder token and gestured at the grimoire because he doesn't want to say anything because his players will hear it, and I'll just point at where I would put it.
And to that point, I would add that if you can have a secondary storyteller, like Adam and I will run games together all the time because it's nice to just be able to bounce things off each other. For me, it's usually, Adam, I think I've done something wrong. And him going, no, you're fine. Just, kill this person instead. But yes, having somebody nearby that you can refer to is excellent advice and confidence builder.
Ellie and I always run games together, and we take turns sitting on each other's shoulders and saying, we are Master Blaster, we run Buttertown, which is maybe not the right idea. In any case, watch Mad Max. Come on, young people. Anyway.
Sorry, Ty, I don't get the reference. I'm too young.
Too not American.
You're not American.
Mad Max is not an American film.
Oh, is that?
Oh, it's Mad Max? Oh, man. Mhm.
What I have been trying to nail down, because look, Ed, you're a special robot machine. You're a rules engine. Not everybody can keep all of the things in their heads that you can keep in your head. If you were going to lay out, these are, I'm going to prioritize some precepts. What would they be for this storyteller?
These are going to be on the fly, so they would probably be better if I'd thought of it in more detail. But step 1, check your character abilities. Make sure that there's not an obvious answer that's literally defined by the ability text. Step 2, check your player perspectives. Some of the time this is like everyone's perspective, and that's very hard to do, but a lot of the time it's literally 2 characters that are interacting. Is this interesting? Is this fun? Is this at least understandable from a balance or meta perspective? Step 3, double check the influence this is happening on the rest of the game. If, I've said on that middle one that it can be affecting everyone, can be affecting just 2 players. If it's just affecting 2 players, you do need to go back and go, okay, well, this is most interesting for this character interaction. Does that have knock-on effects elsewhere? Probably a very gentle step 4 is put that token down, run through the scenario in your head where that has happened, and just look at the next day and see if you think anything comes off the back of it. I think I have this most often when I've got a weird rules decision to make involving alignment changing and whether I have to do it or not, or whether I want to avoid it, and especially pit hagging demons. Just have a quick run through of, wait, right, so this player's now becoming a good demon. I can either kill this good demon or I can kill the old evil demon. If I choose to kill the old evil demon, which I think is most fun, it's backing up this play and doing these things, you get to the end of that process and go, so tomorrow this probably happens, they probably say things about it, they might get executed, do I think this group are likely to do that? And just have a little think about that, because a lot of the time you will realise if there are any things that affect your decision now, if that makes sense. Those would be my sort of sovereign steps for rules things.
Those are pretty good for on the fly. See what he does when he thinks about it. So,